to be involved in the musical journey
Well,
yourself?
and I think, yes, and I think what happens with the, with any of us with a love of music, which starts young, however, either singing it, hearing a lullaby, and then getting it as the use, the passion of it. But what we're finding here in a lot are people that follow their bliss. And it can be either through playing an instrument, I think being a musician, have a love of music, and then as you pointed out earlier, this idea of growing into it. You know, for some, the exposure was early. And for others, it was finding out about it, either radio or CD. But I think as you do a live concert, what really makes a big difference is going to a live concert. And I think for us, the Evanston Symphony Orchestra is going to be part of what that is, live experience. And I would like to ask Gus to give a little bit of a history of that, of how did it come about?
I'd be delighted. We have just finished our 64th, or this is starting our 64th year this year. And for our 60th anniversary, I prepared an exhibit to highlight the history of the orchestra, and I focused on the conductors, each of which gave a special flavor to the experience of the orchestra. And I'd like to go over their names with you and tell you about them. Before I do, I'd like to mention that the ESO feels very fortunate to have had a long positive relationship with Northwestern, the CSO, Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and the North Shore Choral Society are other members of this program. The Evanston Symphony was started at the end of World War II. Up until that time, musicians in Evanston were able to play in symphonies of the Northwestern University had various orchestras that people in the community could play in. But when the veterans came back from the war, a lot of them, the musical types, went to Northwestern to study music, and the orchestras were taken up by their own students. At that point, the symphony members decided, the Evanston community members decided that they needed to create their own symphony. And the first performance was held at First Methodist Church in Evanston, and the conductor was Timothy Feitler, who was a graduate student of Northwestern.
Now, Gus, can you maybe bring us even quickly into where we are today in terms of those years, of the amount of conductors, and where were the two sites? What was important about where the ESO could be? I mean, the idea of a venue, having a location.
The first venue after the First Methodist Church was Kahn Auditorium in the National College of Education, which is now Scott Hall of Northwestern. And the first conductor was the organist of the NBC radio station in Chicago, who conducted for 5 seasons.
So your
5 concerts, I'm sorry.
Your roots really, they started in a way Chicago, and then having that presence there, and then moving into Evanston. But how did you survive? How did the ESO survive during these years in terms of keeping itself together, and where do you get your musicians, and I'm seeing that you're going where you got the conductors. The conductors were already, you had a good tie-in.
The musicians were experienced in a double life. One was music and the other one was their profession, whatever that might be. Our current membership of the orchestra is about 100, and there are lawyers, there are architects like myself, there are various kinds who love to be able to play music as a reinvigoration of their own psyche within all of their musical experience, their work experience. And the reason why I focus on the conductors is because they kept the orchestra focused and strong.
Because one of the questions with conductors, do you find that every conductor has a different way of making a production? And is that why conductors get changed every so often, because the pieces they put together? Present
It's
to the
partly
audience
that,
every year?
but it's also the focus and the commitment of the conductor. For instance, the concertmaster of the Chicago Symphony was the conductor for 2 years, but he left to become the director of the music school in Pittsburgh. Whereas the first cellist of the Chicago Symphony, Frank Miller, was the conductor for 22 seasons. And he built the orchestra into a very powerful community group. Who took over from him was Lynn Shornick, who had a number of other focuses in Waukegan specifically, both opera and other groups.
So what I'm hearing is conductors are coming from many different areas. They come in and they go to other institutions, while the players, the musicians themselves, stay a part of the orchestra?
Correct.
I see. And then going into that, I think we have a